Good evening, curious people of the internet. This is Seda Radar speaking. Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Kitchen, this time from a different perspective, because I think probably you want to see what actually I also cook. This is going to be a very interesting, very special episode. And I think we are already quite known for having lots of different perspectives in this show. And tonight's guest is an astrologer. His name is Alexander von Schlieffen. Please welcome with me, Alexander. Hey, Alex.
Hello.
Hey. By the way, is it okay to call you Alex, or do you prefer?
Whatever you feel like. I have so many different names.
Well,
no.
I haven't asked you this before. I should have. Well,
No.
Alexander is not only an astrologer, which is already very, very interesting and curious, and we will hear all about that, but he's also an artist at the same time. And right before this scene, actually in the kitchen, he was standing in front of one of his paintings, I think, right?
Yes.
Yes, so it was a beautiful big painting. Alexander, how does one become an astrologer?
I don't know. It's so weird. I have never thought about this question, but it's a great question. You know, I played music. I was interested in philosophy, in many different things, and I was already having my life set up as a painter. Mm-hmm. And astrology was not part of my life. And I thought astrology is something that people do who are kind of living in this kitschy, esoteric world. And it's something that I would never take into consideration. So I was not into astrology at all. I was not interested. And I have to say, when you just go to the internet, or when you look at the newspapers, mm-hmm. the majority of what you get, what astrology should be, is a bit like that, still nowadays. And mm-hmm. so I felt, no. But I had a studio made. You know, I had an atelier. This was way back in Cologne, like almost 30 years ago in Cologne, I had a studio. And it was my neighbor, and she invited me to come over for a coffee, and it took her some time to make the coffee. And she was into astrology, and she always talked astrology with me. And I didn't know what I should think about it. But since she was a person, mm-hmm. I felt okay. And then I was sitting in her studio. I was sitting in front of the bookshelf. And 99% of the books looked like esoteric, kitschy, awful. You know, it could not be worse. But there was one book that looked different. The cover was different. And so I was just sitting there. I had some spare time. I was waiting for the coffee. I pulled out this book, and it was called Genius and Demon. And I opened the book, and I started to read the introduction by the author himself. And I felt like, wow, what is this? If somebody can write like this, and if somebody has such a broad imagination and such a kind of particular wisdom, this is something you can grasp right away when you read somebody's text. I felt like, this is not esoteric kitsch. This must be something else. So I took the book. She gave me the book, and I still have it with me. And I was blown away, and I was fascinated. At that time, I was so passionate right away that I bought all the books of this guy. I was trying to meet this guy, but he was already dead.
Oh, well, which does not necessarily pose a problem for an astrologer, I assume.
Yeah, but when you read something, and when you see there's a really beautiful mind, and you might have the opportunity to meet that incredible personality in real life, this is a chance. This is something I would have loved to do. But I visited his wife and his best friend. He was, at that time, he was already in his late 90s. He invited me to come over, and, you know. And I have to say that this first encounter with astrology has had a strong impact on my relationship to astrology, because it was like a boy who discovers a new toy. So my relationship with astrology is based on pleasure. because there are many people. Yeah,
that's actually a great hook for me to also talk about another pleasure, which is food. So what is your relationship with food? But before you answer that question, I want to just let people know, because I assume there will be lots of questions coming to your way on Slide at DAV. So guys, if you want to ask Alexander any questions, you know, about your future, this might be a chance. We are on Slide at DAV 87235, 87235, if you want to ask any questions on astrology. So what is your relationship with food?
Oh my God. Almost as bad as my relationship to astrology, my relationship to painting, and my relationship to music.
So passion.
Food is so essential. Food is total pleasure. Food is reconnecting us with the soul, the body. Food is pleasure. It's so wonderful. But I'm not a great cook, although my beloved people say that there are some things that I can do really well, but I love food. And I always loved food.
And what are you preparing tonight?
I was preparing something very simple.
Simple is good.
Simple is good. And this is something I discovered for the first time at the age of 10. Mm-hmm. You know, these are, I call them butt tomatoes. Because they look a bit like a butt. Some are more sexy than the other ones, but they do.
Yeah. I think Germans call them the ox heart. Oxen heads. Yeah.
They can do that.
You still call it.
Tomato, you know? And for me, they are the most delicious tomatoes. And for me, the tomato, tomates, is the most incredible vegetable.
It is a great vegetable.
And I loved it all my life. And it's something, the tomato is so important to me. And at the age of 10, we went on a holiday with my father to France, and we sat on the beach, and he just bought tomatoes. He added some oil and some salt, and we put it on a baguette. That was so delicious.
And the doors to heaven opened up.
Yes. And I think a butt tomato is definitely one of the secret entrance to heaven.
Awesome. I'm hoping that you will be revealing many secret entrances to heaven tonight for us. So now we know about your story, and we also know that you're a quite prominent astrologer in German-speaking lands. You write, the columns for lots of newspapers, and I mean, what is your daily work look like? You sit there and every morning or in night you look into the stars. I mean, I can't even imagine, so please forgive me asking so bluntly, but what is the daily ritual of an astrologer?
My daily ritual is that first of all, I love to look at the heaven, because I just love the beauty of the sky. And since I bumped into astrology via pleasure and not via necessity, because many people who do astrology professionally came into astrology because they had a situation in their life where they didn't know how to resolve it, and they didn't find any opportunity trying to resolve it with so-called traditional options. And then they kind of bumped into an astrologer, and so it was looking for help. My approach is not looking for help. My approach is sitting there and discovering something that's so incredibly pleasant and delightful and inspiring. So the funny thing is, I hardly ever look at my own horoscope, because I don't do astrology to optimize my own life. I apply astrology. I study astrology. I have been lecturing kind of almost worldwide, and I write. I've written books. I have done audiobooks. I do a podcast. So I always do charts for other people, and I enjoy doing that. And every once in a while, when I know there's a very important decision, I also look at my own chart, but it's hardly ever there. You know, my son now is in a situation because he's 20 and he's about to swap his studies. And today I met somebody, and she was a former student, astrology student of mine, and she asked me, did you look at the chart of your son in order to find an orientation for his new studies?
Ah.
And I said, yeah, thank you very much. That's a good thing, you know, because
Yes.
like, I do it, but I do it for the sake of the pleasure of doing it. And so I don't always do it for myself, you know?
And so when you look into the charts to kind of have an idea around, you know, making important decisions, is it that you kind of look into the future actually, or is it, what does it actually tell you? Does it tell you how to behave into the future, or does it tell you more about how you've got there?
Both. It tells me both. A birth chart is like a cosmic portrait of your biopsychological constitution. Mm-hmm. So when I look at a chart, it's very important to look at what is the disposition of somebody, what is the physical tension, what is the emotional background, what is the mental setup, in order to find out what would be the best possible version of somebody. When you look at a natal birth chart, and then you look at the present time, you look at the future, sometimes we look back, and then it's about the slow unfolding of all the opportunities that you see in the natal chart. And then you also look at possible challenges in the next year, or things that will come up that will be an important opportunity. And this is particularly true for this year, because this year is, from the astrological point of view, it's a huge number. You know,
absolutely. I definitely want to talk about that, but before going into you know, the meaning of this 2020 and the whole craziness and you know, how the charts are playing into all of that, I want to know about your attitude when you encounter a person. For instance, when we were first on the phone, I was like kind of nervous, because I get nervous only in 2 occasions in my life. One of them is if I know someone is a psychologist, I start being like, I don't know where to put my hands. And then when I was talking to you, I had a similar feeling. I was like, do I sound okay? What can he hear about me that I don't know about myself? So it feels like, you know, being almost like, you know, you can't hide anything. It's really weird. So when you meet someone new, how much of your decision about this person, or when you want to make a decision in general, how much of that do you allow to be influenced by your knowledge of you know, of the horoscopes and of the stars?
First of all, I understood why you cook while you talk to the people, so you have to move in a way that nobody can, you know, get to a certain point. That makes sense. That's cool. You know, I have been doing portraits since my high school time. I have been doing portrait commissions. So I have a way to look at people when they are in front of me that is purely visual. And so when I meet someone, I don't turn on the astrology switch. I'm just there and I look at the person and I feel the person. But when it comes to astrology, I turn on the astrology switch and then I go there.
Ah, so you do it only if people particularly ask for it, or if you feel the need?
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is when I go out and I meet people, and you can imagine, I meet a lot of people. This is just like when you do that kind of work, people, you know, want to talk to you. And the funny thing is,
absolutely.
I never ask anyone about their star sign. Never. And then they are kind of, when they know that I'm an astrologer, they are kind of waiting for me to ask that question. But I don't do it. You know? Because I don't want to pre-label a situation, and I don't want to give people the impression that a situation would be pre-labeled. By the way, what are you cooking?
Yeah, well, so you have seen that I grated cheese.
Yeah.
It was so-called backkäse, so a
It's
really
cheese coming from
stinky,
yeah.
stinky mountain cheese, actually from Italy. And then I'm going to be putting one egg in it,
Yeah.
and then I put it on bread.
Yeah.
And I will then how do you say it? I will then
Right.
how do you say braten? Fry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will then fry it
Right.
in the pan. And this is something that's Turkish. My mother used to do it. We call it cheese bread. Very simple, but very yummy, extremely delicious, and easy to make. Great breakfast food, by the way, if you like, French or Turkish style heavy breakfast stuff.
But do you have
Yeah.
that in Turkey?
Yeah, we have old, ripened cheese. So my mother takes either ripened cheese, or she takes sometimes feta.
Yeah.
They both melt really nice, and you want to taste
Yes.
this really cheesy taste,
Right.
because there is no other spice in it, so we don't put any salt or anything else.
Nothing else. Okay.
Yeah, no. So you also didn't ask me about my stars.
No, I
How
didn't. It's true.
if you have a guess, then I mean, I'm not going to ask you to guess anything with me, but if you were to guess, then later, are you usually on the right side, or does that move back and forth?
When you do a birth chart of a person, it's a very, very complex composition.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you call my birth sign can be somewhere hidden in a shadow. And there could be other things in a chart that are much more present. So my personal experience is that you don't always see and feel the so-called birth time in the person, but you might feel something else, like the rising sign or a dominant planet. So I also don't do that number. I'm sorry.
Excellent. Well, wait,
It's interesting for me. It's very interesting for me because, my relationship to astrology is so incredibly intense and passionate, and I do it full on. But when I don't do it, I don't do it because I like not to do it in order to get an inspiration from other fields that then nurture my relationship with astrology. If I would just walk around just being an astrologer 24/7,
yeah,
I could not change or expand my perception, So it's about getting more inspiration and more food for the images, for the interpretation.
That is really interesting. Actually, when I was talking to a very dear friend, and I said to her, I'm going to have this really interesting guest in astrology, and she said, we were kind of joking, but not joking at the same time. She said, well, people always think about that moment of birth as being the important moment, but
Yes.
isn't it also important to know the moment of conceivement in order to be able to interpret, so why do we put so much value on the moment of birth, but there's so much before already?
So this is a very common question, and
Really?
it's a reasonable
Okay.
question. No, nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
It's a very common question, and it's probably also connected to the fact that the moment of conceivement is connected to, let's say, a particular kind of pleasure that you might like to remember, since it's connected to the moment of conception. But what is important in astrology is the first autonomous moment. So when the child is out of the womb and you cut the umbilical cord, it's the first moment when the new being is on its own. And this is when the chart starts. So a chart is always, it's not about the preparation, it's about the beginning, the first moment. And then the vision is, the first moment is like a seed, and it contains the whole potential that will unfold over the years, over a lifespan, you know?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So, well, there are already questions coming in. So just give me, please, 1 second. Okay. And while I'm looking for the questions, so you are an artist and you're an astrologer at the same time. And we know about, the harmony of the spheres and the, music in the stars. So what is the relationship, in your opinion, between how does the universe kind of connect
with?
Well, with, the vibrations and with the music. What is the relationship between those different things?
These different areas. So the thing is, if you look at your body, you have different organs, but in each organ, you have a repetition of the whole organism. So you have the relationship between the microcosmos and the macrocosmos. And we are part of the earth. And so the earth is part of us. It's a body. We are connected to this physical body. And this body is permanently moving around itself in circles. And there are all the other heavenly bodies that are connected to this system, which we call the solar system, which is like a body. It's like one organism. So everything within this organism is interconnected and is related. It's a very simple way of seeing that. When you see a doctor, for example, let's say you have a problem with your hand, and you can go to see a doctor and then he would just repair your hand. But there will be the doctor who's asking you more questions about why what is happening to your hand is happening right now at this particular time, and what it might mean for the rest of your life, for your psychological well-being, for your emotional well-being. So it's kind of embedded in a bigger vision of interconnectedness. Yeah. And since, the solar system is our biggest organism, and if you would take out one planet of our solar system, it would collapse completely. It's like if you would cut away one of your arms, you could still survive, but the whole system would be out of balance, So
that is actually really interesting, because I'm also very much interested in thinking in larger connected units, not only in terms of our own body, but also our connectedness with the nature. I think humans kind of started forgetting that we are part of the nature as well. Well, we think that we're these extremely logical, extremely data-driven beings that just make things and that can influence things, as if those things don't have an effect on us. And I know that you have a very interesting view also on this whole notion of, for instance, burnout and things like that. So you talk about systems being out of balance. Let's talk about that a little bit. Have we forgotten to think in terms of time and in terms of listening to our inner selves?
So we come out of a 200-year cycle that has been very materialistic. So it's been about the material world decides about what is real and what is not real. It's the time of the Industrial Revolution. It's the time of a new financial system. It's the time of the exact science. So what we call reality must be based on numbers. It must be proven by numbers. But our history and the cultural history is much older than that. And I'm going to talk in one of my next podcast series, I'm going to talk about the difference if the origin of what we call the truth would be either a number or a myth, an image. Because we live in a time where we always want to deduct everything to a number.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it was 3 years ago, I read an article that scientists at the Harvard University have done a statistics on musicians, and they found out that singing in a choir is very elevating and supporting for your emotional being, for your ability to connect socially for your self-consciousness and blah, blah, blah.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. And now you have a print.
Yeah.
And because it's been proved by a by statistics,
Yeah.
and there's a number, and they have decided if it's 1,000, it's enough. And now it's part of a reality. But people who sing in choirs have known this for 8,000 years. And they never, when you make music and you play music and you sing in a choir, you play in a band, you play in an orchestra, you know that because out of your experience and practice. And you don't need that kind of particular scientific proof of the necessity and the significance of your activity.
Yeah,
so this
absolutely.
Is like, sorry.
Same thing, I think, with all of the, how things in the universe belong together. I remember reading this really interesting book by Joachim Behrendt. Nada Brahma is the name of the book, and it explains everything in the universe in musical terms. And then you also have statistics that support, the claims. And he says, like just you said, for thousands and thousands of years, we've known that mind and body are actually one thing, but we kind of still tend very much to separate it, and especially we go all for the logical mind and ignore everything else.
And Joachim Behrendt, this guy you mentioned now, I think he's not alive anymore, but he was a passionate lover of music.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
He was trying to contribute something to the profound understanding of music. But since he did write this book in a time where the impact of this exact science and the focus on numbers, he felt compelled to include statistics to approve of his insights. But in future, we won't have to do that shit anymore. Because the trend will change so radically that people will see that this is just a way to approve of some things. The statistics and the mechanical and the numbers, they are good to improve the mechanical sides, the technical sides of life.
Yeah, and let's jump really to today, actually also to the beginning of 2020. You have already said that it was a significant, it was the end of certain cycles and the beginning of certain cycles. So can you explain all of these crazy things that are happening right now in terms of, do you feel like I've known it? I've been telling this, but
the astrological perspective is always a different one than the worldly one. Because we live in a world that has been very pragmatic, and it's the end of patriarchal thinking. So it's the male thinking. The male thinking is linear.
Okay.
It goes that it's the idea that there's always a linear, straightforward development in things. And the female experience is that life is cyclical, because you women, you live in a cycle. You live in a monthly cycle. So you physically know what a cycle is. But we men don't do that. We don't have that physical experience of a cycle. So it's this way of thinking, which has also had a strong impact on the 20th century and the modern times, is very linear. It's just like straightforward, forward. This is like, life is like this. And so this time is going to end. And that means that big cycles are ending, and especially a big cycle that didn't respect the cycles is ending. So a non-cyclical cycle is coming to an end. And this is such a huge shift in all kinds of paradigms and situations, culturally, economically, politically. And we can see it now. I mean, of course, although it sounds stupid to say that, when you are an astrologer, astrologers knew that quite way before that this year will be so significant.
That's interesting,
Yeah, but the world makes us believe that everything is based on cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people think that the pandemia now is the reason why the world is at that particular situation. From the astrological perspective, there is a huge shift, and the pandemic is not the reason, but is like the tool to manifest a big change. But it's not a reason in itself. And that is a completely different perspective on what's happening right now.
That is interesting. So, I have followed a little bit of your podcast about the 2020 horoscope, and you do talk about these things. You do talk about, and it's very interesting to hear someone kind of predict all these huge shifts months before they happen. So sometimes, do you sometimes get scared of what you think might be happening? I mean, no?
No.
Okay.
But you know what I do? I mean, this would be another hour to talk about, what's happening right now. But there's a situation in the world where people react, especially on the social media. They react on what they think they get as an information.
Mm-hmm.
And so people build up an opinion on the information they get in the social media. And so people discuss on that level every day. Is it right? Is it wrong? What's right? What's wrong? What should we do?
Mm-hmm.
The astrological perspective is away from that. It looks at this situation from another point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And this point of view says there's a change. And the question is, what is happening right now? Where is it going to go to? Where is it going to lead us to?
Mm-hmm.
The things that happen right now, they are like an introduction to a complete new era.
Mm-hmm.
I can already see the changes happening. But most people don't know that there is a shift from a 200-year Earth cycle to a 200-year air cycle. So we move into a completely different world. And since most people don't know that, they think everything must be like it has been in the 200-year Earth cycle. But this time is over. Okay. And we are about to build up new social structures, to build up a new world. And maybe it's hard to say, but when you look at what's happening now, there is something like an intention behind what's happening. Maybe there is a group of people who intend to do what's happening now. But then comes out of the old 200-year Earth cycle.
Okay, so they might be unintentionally causing lots of effects they are not necessarily thinking about right now. So we have questions coming at you, lots of them. So the first one says, if I understand correctly, you're not a psychic or even very spiritual. What are some examples of what makes you think astrology is valuable? Would you consider it science at all?
The reason why astrology is valuable is because our life and our time is defined by the movement of the planets. Mm-hmm. And we forgot this. So a day is one circulation of the Earth. A month is a circulation of the moon circulating around itself, around the Earth. Mm-hmm. A year is the two of them circulating, like crazy around themselves and around each other, circulating around the sun. And all the other planets, they do nothing else but keeping on circulating. So the cycle is the foundation of our life. Mm-hmm. But our mind, and this is the male mind, it's it's the ultimate result of the patriarchal society, makes us think that time is linear and we can decide about things, but we can't, because when day is over, night is coming. It's very simple. So this is the foundation of astrology. It's based on real cycles. Plus, I'm not a psychic. I'm just working with that,
Yeah. And wait, just give me 1 second, please. So I have a little bit more quiet.
Are you happy with the result of what
Well,
you
no, the dog just came from the walk. So, and I mean, you spoke about a new world. What is that new world? What will it look like?
The past world, the past 200 years were based on materialism. So it's like yours and mine. So it's your cheese and my tomates. And when we talk about you and me, and about yours and mine, sorry, there's a gap, there's a boundary between us. So surviving in a kingdom of earth means I get my thing and I try to dominate the world based on physical matters, so based on money. That means it's also based on rivalry. I have to make more money to have more tomatoes than you have Bergkäse.
Yeah.
And the future is about, it's the element air, and air is about cooperation and networking. So it's about working together rather than against. It's building up structures together. And those are things we have experienced in some cultures for a few hundred years, that building up culture means also to collaborate, to bring energies together, to exchange ideas, rather than to exclude ideas and to say, this is your idea, this is my idea is better. This is a very conventional concept.
Yeah.
The new era, the new life era, it's going to be a 200-year epoch. It will only function when people start to collaborate. And we have already developed the technical tools and a certain kind of knowledge how to do that. Yeah. But when there's a shift in time and when there's a shift between two eras, between two epochs, it's like a birth. And when you give birth to a child, it's fantastic, it's powerful. But it's always also a bit bloody, and it's connected with pain. It's connected with something you don't know where it's going to go, if it's going to happen, but you want it to happen.
Yeah.
This is the time where we are in now. It's like the birth of a new era, and we don't know where this thing is going to go and where it's going to lead us to. But most people think, so when is the pandemic over and when can we return to where we have been before? But this is not what it's about. This is a shift. So it's a transition from one era to the next.
And I mean, when you talk about transition from one era to the next, and say this is the new networked age, this is the age of collaboration that's expecting us, and if we don't really listen to the necessities of this new age, what could possibly go wrong if we just try to go as we have gone before?
I would say that if there would be some people or some groups that try to maintain the spirit of the time that's over now, things will fall apart and things will disintegrate. And there will be no connection. It's like, whenever you look at cycles and you see there's a new zeitgeist, even for 38 years, for 12 years, for 20 years, all of a sudden things change and people adapt to the change. And things work and function in society in a new way.
Yeah. Well, I'm really passionate about this new age, and I'm really interested in making it work, because as you said, I think the collaboration and this idea that we all belong together and that we actually, whatever we do matters and it has an effect on, other 7 billion people, that's like this ripple effect. I'm really hoping that humanity is going to be thinking more in those terms about how we belong together rather than what are our differences. there are many questions. So is it possible to make a chart of any value to an 18-month-old?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course it is. And it's also, it's especially of value for the parents. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at a newborn and because a chart also contains the parents, you can, if I would make your birth chart, there would also be information about your parents, about Anne and Dede.
Okay.
And that's very interesting. And so if you have a newborn, it's about how can you support the nature, the inherent nature, the cosmic nature, so to say. It sounds a bit pathetic, but...
No, I like it. I like it, actually.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really. What is my cosmic nature? I wish someone would have thought about that before.
It's nice.
Before my upbringing.
Yeah. No, but you see, they are different. There are certain cultures that are more connected. The Oriental culture has a more profound connection to the earth, and therefore a stronger connection to the heavens as well. The West European culture is very mental. So it's like, I have to understand things with my mind. And this is more important what I feel, for example. So, and since I have to say something private, I love children. And I loved to be with babies. I'm not anymore. At some point I will be a grandfather, and then I have the next But I think children are the most exciting experience and magical wonder of the world. And it's important to support the children. So when I do a chart for a newborn, it's not about, oh, this is a bad thing and this is going to happen. It's about how can you further the potential that you can see in the cosmic portrait.
Oh my God. Cosmic portrait and cosmic nature. Beautiful. So there is another question. It says, you talk about how a lot of science can be reductionist. I find it interesting because the constellations you look at can also be reduced to numbers, no?
The constellations that I'm looking at.
Yes. So the person is saying, also what you do can be reduced to numbers. Because No?
No, it's not the number that counts, it's the image. Astrology is a mythological language, like the mythology of the old Greeks. And, it's about images. If you look at the Greek mythology, it's Zeus, it's these different figures. And it's not about whether they really were there, but they are like a condensation of the human experience, condensed to a beautiful mythological image. And this is what astrology is about. Astrology is about images and not about numbers. We work with numbers in order to work with time, but astrology connects the numbers and the time cycles with mythology. But in terms, I forgot this, sorry, in the question before. In the past, before the Age of Enlightenment, astrology was considered to be a science.
Yeah.
But in the post-Enlightenment era, and especially in the past 200 years, where the concept of what science is and is not, astrology is not a science. It's an art of interpretation based on scientific researches.
Absolutely. Actually, similar to music too. Music and medicine and math and arithmetics and things like that were taught together, and then and then you had the other so I think they were called quadrivium and trivium, so you could study either or, and it's really interesting how we kind of detached from that model into a model of actually even denouncing certain things because we can't seem to be able to explain them. But you also spoke about time, and I'm really interested in this notion of time when it comes to astrology, because talking about cycles that go over 200 years and 300 years and hundreds of years. So how can we even imagine, fitting into that kind of mindset for and really start thinking about the farther future rather than the next 5 years?
This is very interesting because the cyclical thinking is not a mindset. It's organic, it's physical. It's like day and night. This is the most elementary cycle. Then it's the month. It's the next cycle. Then we have the seasons. Then we have the year. And then we have 12 years. We have 7 years. Every 7 years, everything changes. And every 7 years, there's a crisis and you have to reset things. Every 3 years, you get something like a payout kind of thing. But this is not mental, because this is not invented by anybody. It's not invented by a human being. It's not an intellectual idea. It's based on an observation of what's happening in life, And if you look at the cycles of the planets, it's just what natural time is. It's nothing else than nature, So, of course, now, since we are entering a new 200-year cycle, we should not only think about the next 5 years, definitely.
Yeah.
And especially the year 2020 itself. It's an incredible, it's like a little hole. It's like this. It's a transition, and we have to try to make the year happen. But the year itself is so transitional that you don't have to expect any major results yet, because it's the change of one era to the next era, and then the new era will begin. And it's about what's going to happen then. And it's about decisions that will have a long-lasting impact on whether it's on your personal life or whether it's on social, political, cultural decisions, And I talk to many people, as you can imagine, and everybody says it's strange now, but hardly anybody wants to go back to where they have been before. Many people say it's so good this shit is ending, and we're going to head for something new, Yeah. Even if it's difficult and if it's connected to a lot of moments that we cannot anticipate right now. Sorry.
Yeah. So in your terms, it really does. This is the year of transition that's going to be leading to a new connected and networked age. Actually, it sounds all great. And since we're getting towards the, almost at the end of our show, look, this is my bread. They're very good. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, they will taste really well. I'm going to be serving them to my family in just a few minutes.
So you don't
late evening breakfast. What's that?
You don't eat them. You don't eat it.
Oh, sometimes I do. Of course, I'm going to have one bite too. I definitely love eating. Well, Alexander, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And before we end, we have to tell a joke. That's our rule.
Yes.
So do you have one? Exactly. Do you have one in your bag?
There's only one joke in my life.
Okay.
and fortunately, it's in English anyway, so I didn't have to translate it.
Perfect.
And it's the only joke I know, and it's also probably the only joke I really like. And this joke is about a limerick competition. Do you know what a limerick is?
No.
A limerick is a verse. It's like a kind of poetry. It's a rhyme system. So a limerick is like, it's 1, 2, 2. It's A, B, B, A, kind of, like a rhythm kind of thing. So it's about a limerick, and there's the last round, and the last two people who are in the last round is a truck driver and a Rabbi. And they both are supposed to do a limerick that ends on the word Timbuktu, the town in Africa. So the Rabbi goes, I was a rabbi all my life. I have 3 children and 1 wife. I read the Torah through and through on my way to Timbuktu. And there goes the truck driver. A friend and I to London went. We met 3 women in a tent. As they were 3 and we were 2, I booked 1 and Tim booked 2. This is the only joke I know. This is my favorite joke.
This is really good. Very good. Awesome.
Now you know what a limerick is.
Yes, no, I will never forget.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think we should teach our children like this. Excellent. Yeah, with humor. I have one too. And since my last 2 days were not brilliant, I think this one is going to go really well. Okay. Why do the nurses have a red marker?
That could lead us into dark fantasies.
Because just in case they need to draw blood. I know. I was like, well, since he's an artist, I must say, I must have a joke about it. Yes. Exactly. Well, Alexander, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. Please stay in the line for a couple of more minutes to hang out with our people. And at the same time, I'm going to say good night to everybody out there. Tomorrow, I'm going to have an awesome opera singer, Sarah Maria Sung, joining me at the Entrepreneur's Kitchen. She just brought out an album which is called Killer Instincts. You want to know about it. And also she's writing a children's book, which is less about killer instincts, hopefully. And I want to thank you all and looking forward to seeing you and welcoming you at the Entrepreneur's Kitchen tomorrow night. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.